Detective Sarah Mitchell had seen her fair share of grisly crime scenes, but this one was different. The small, dimly lit room in the old apartment building was silent, save for the faint hum of the fluorescent light overhead. The walls were stained with dark, rust-colored splatters, and the air was thick with the metallic scent of blood. In the center of the room, a man sat slumped in a chair, his face contorted in a grotesque expression of terror. His throat had been slit, a deep, gaping wound that had drained the life from his body, but it wasn't the murder itself that unsettled Sarah. It was the meticulousness, the eerie precision with which the crime had been committed. The killer had left no trace. No evidence of their presence, just the body, posed as if on display, and a message scrawled on the mirror in blood, "I see you." This was the third victim in as many weeks, each one found in a similar state, and the same chilling message left behind. The press had already dubbed the perpetrator, the Mirror Man, a name that sent shivers down Sarah's spine every time she heard it. This killer was different from the others she had hunted. There was a cold, calculating intelligence behind these murders, a mind that enjoyed playing games. Sarah had always prided herself on her ability to get inside the heads of killers, to understand their twisted logic and use it against them. But the Mirror Man eluded her. There was no pattern to his victims, no apparent connection between them. They were different ages, genders, and backgrounds, and yet he had chosen them for reasons she couldn't comprehend. As she stood in that small, blood-stained room, Sarah felt a sense of unease she hadn't felt in years. The killer wasn't just taunting the police, he was taunting her. The message on the mirror felt personal, as if it were meant specifically for her. That night, as she sat alone in her apartment, Sarah pored over the case files, searching for something she had missed. Every detail, every photograph, was etched into her mind, but the pieces refused to come together. The image of the message on the mirror haunted her, the words burning into her thoughts, "I see you." Whoever this killer was, they were watching her, studying her. She had always been the one to do the hunting, but now she was the prey. The days passed in a blur of sleepless nights and dead ends. Sarah threw herself into the investigation, pushing her team to their limits, but the Mirror Man remained elusive. Each new victim was a blow to her confidence, a reminder that she was losing control. The messages on the mirrors became more sinister, more mocking. "You can't hide, always watching, closer than you think." Sarah's obsession with the case grew, consuming her every waking moment. She began to see the killer's shadow everywhere she went, in the faces of strangers on the street, in the dark corners of her apartment. Her colleagues noticed the change in her, the way she became more withdrawn, more paranoid, but she brushed off their concerns. She couldn't afford to be distracted, not when the Mirror Man was still out there. Then, one evening, as she sat at her kitchen table, staring blankly at the cold cup of coffee in front of her, Sarah's phone buzzed. She picked it up. Her heart skipping a beat when she saw the message, "I see you, Sarah." The text was from an unknown number, and it sent a wave of cold fear crashing over her. Her hands trembled as she read the words again, trying to make sense of them. The Mirror Man knew her name. He was taunting her directly now, and that terrified her more than she cared to admit. She traced the number, but it led nowhere, a burner phone, untraceable. The message was brief, but it was enough to push Sarah over the edge. She knew she was being watched, and that realization filled her with a sense of dread she had never experienced before. Sarah's apartment became her fortress. She installed extra locks on her doors, set up surveillance cameras, and kept her gun within arm's reach at all times. But no matter what she did, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always there, just out of sight, watching her every move. The Mirror Man had gotten under her skin, and she hated herself for letting it happen. But she couldn't stop thinking about him, about the way he seemed to know her so intimately. As if he were inside her mind. The pressure was unbearable, and it began to take its toll. She became jumpy, irritable, and the sleepless nights only made it worse. One night, after hours of restless tossing and turning, Sarah got up and went to the bathroom. She splashed cold water on her face, trying to shake the exhaustion that clung to her like a heavy blanket. As she looked up at the mirror, she froze. There, written in red lipstick, were the words, "I'm here." Her blood ran cold as she stared at the message. How had he gotten into her apartment? She had checked the locks, reviewed the camera footage, and yet somehow he had been inside. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. The mirror man had been inside her home. Had stood just where she was standing now, and she hadn't even known. Panic seized her, and she reached for her gun, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it. She searched the apartment, every corner, every shadow, but there was no sign of him. Just the message on the mirror, mocking her. Sarah called in her team, but there was nothing they could find. No fingerprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing. It was as if the killer had vanished into thin air. But Sarah knew better. He was still out there, still watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The days that followed were a blur. Sarah's paranoia deepened, and she became increasingly isolated. She stopped trusting her colleagues, convinced that the mirror man could be anyone, even someone within the department. She barely ate, barely slept, her every waking moment consumed by the fear that he was close, that he would strike again, and then, one night, the phone rang. It was a blocked number, and Sarah's heart pounded as she answered. "Hello." Her voice was shaky, betraying the fear she had tried so hard to keep at bay. There was a long pause, and then a voice spoke, low and chilling. "You can't hide from me, Sarah." It was him. The mirror man. Rage and fear clashed within her, and she gripped the phone tightly. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Why are you doing this?" The voice on the other end chuckled, a sound that made her skin crawl. "I'm whoever you want me to be. I'm everyone you've ever met. I'm the man in the mirror, the shadow on the wall. I'm your worst nightmare, Sarah, and I'm always with you." Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the line went dead. She stared at the phone, her mind racing. She couldn't take it anymore. This man, whoever he was, had destroyed her life, driven her to the brink of madness. And she was done playing his game. Grabbing her gun, she left her apartment, determined to end this once and for all. She drove through the darkened streets, her mind a whirlwind of anger and desperation. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to confront him, to stop him before he could hurt anyone else. The city was eerily quiet as she drove, the only sound the hum of the engine and her own ragged breathing. And then, she saw it, a figure standing in the middle of the road, illuminated by the headlights. She slammed on the brakes, her heart pounding as she recognized him, the mirror man. He stood there, calm and composed, his face hidden in the shadows. Sarah stepped out of the car, her gun trained on him, her hand steady for the first time in days. "It's over," she said, her voice cold and hard. "You're not going to hurt anyone else." The mirror man laughed, a sound that sent shivers down her spine. "Hurt? I'm not here to hurt you, Sarah. I'm here to help you see the truth." "What truth?" she demanded, her finger hovering over the trigger. "The truth about who you really are." Before she could react, he stepped into the light, and Sarah's world shattered. She was looking at herself. The man before her was identical to her in every way. Same face, same eyes, same everything. It was like looking into a mirror, but this was no reflection. This was real. "You see now, don't you?" The mirror man, her double, smiled, a cruel, knowing smile. "You've been chasing yourself all along." The gun slipped from her hands, clattering to the ground as the realization hit her like a tidal wave. She had been the one all along. The murders, the messages, the torment, it was all her. Some part of her mind, fractured and broken, had created the mirror man, and now he was real, standing before her, the embodiment of her own madness. "No," she whispered, shaking her head in denial. "This isn't real." "But it is," her double said, stepping closer. "You can't run from who you are, Sarah. You can't hide from the truth." As the mirror man reached out to touch her, everything went black. The last thing Sarah saw was her own face, twisted in